Welcome to Debt Matters. You know that feeling when you sit down at the end of the month, you open up your laptop and you just stare at your household budget?
Yeah, that familiar dread.
Right, exactly. You have your income on one side and all those outgoing expenses on the other. And for a lot of us, I mean, it is a very delicate balancing act.
Absolutely.
But what happens when one of those essential, non-negotiable costs, like your utility bill, suddenly demands a much bigger slice of your income?
Well, it forces a mathematical reality that, honestly, consumers and creditors simply cannot ignore.
Yeah.
It alters the entire mechanics of that monthly balancing act you were talking about. It just shifts money away from other obligations.
And that is really our mission for this conversation.
Yeah.
We are taking a look at the UK's latest inflation figures, specifically, how they are being driven by energy bills. And we are going to break down the practical, everyday realities this creates. We are looking at this from your perspective as a consumer, from the perspective of the creditors you interact with, and, well, the operational reality for the broader debt collection sector.
It is a very practical conversation to have right now. The updates we are seeing in the financial data, they are really the next phase of household financial management.
Yeah, getting out of the theory.
Exactly. We are moving away from theoretical economic models and dealing with the hard numbers of what people can actually afford to pay on a random Tuesday morning.
So let us get right into the numbers driving this squeeze. The primary catalyst in the materials we are reviewing is the recent move by Ofgem, the UK's independent energy regulator.
Right, the cap hike.
Yeah, they raised the household energy price cap by 13% in July. And for anyone managing a household, 13% is a hefty jump for a bill that already takes up a massive portion of the monthly spend.
It is huge. It completely changes the baseline of the household economy. And that single increase in the energy cap, it really acts as an engine for broader inflation.
How so? What are the specific figures looking like?
Well, economists are tracking July's Consumer Prices Index, the CPI rising to around 2.9%.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, and that is up from 2.6% in June.
I think we need to unpack the mechanics of that briefly, just to be clear. For everyone listening, energy isn't just one isolated bill, right? It has a disproportionate weighting in the basket of goods used to measure inflation.
That is a crucial point, yeah. Energy costs dictate the production and transportation costs of almost everything else in that CPI basket.
Right, because everything needs energy.
Exactly. When the wholesale price of gas rises, the cost to manufacture goods rises, the cost to heat a warehouse rises.
The cost to transport food to the supermarket rises.
Yes, it is a compounding effect. And the projections show this isn't just a short-term blip.
Unfortunately.
The Bank of England actually anticipates inflation reaching 3.2% before the end of 2026. And that is driven largely by continued instability in global energy markets.
Right. I like to think of a household budget as a rigid container.
Okay, a container.
Yeah, you have this box, and it represents your monthly take-home pay. Inside the box, you have all these solid blocks. Your rent or mortgage block, your groceries block, your transportation block, and your essential utilities block.
I see where you're going with this.
Right. The box itself cannot stretch. Your income is what your income is. So if that essential utilities block suddenly expands by 13% because of the Ofgem cap, it physically has to crush something else inside that container.
That visual perfectly captures the dilemma. The container doesn't magically grow just because global gas prices went up.
Exactly.
So consumers are forced to make immediate real-time decisions about which blocks get crushed to make room.
Well, let me push back a little here because the government is stepping in with some interventions right now.
They are, yes.
We have the planned VAT cut coming in October, which is expected to save consumers an average of £45 a year on electricity.
Right.
And alongside that, we have the £2 bus fare cap in England. So when you start adding those measures up, doesn't that provide some relief inside our rigid container?
We should absolutely acknowledge those interventions, sure, but we really need to run the actual math on them.
Okay, let's do the math.
A £45 annual saving on electricity breaks down to roughly £3.75 a month.
Ooh. Yeah.
Right. If a household annual energy bill is, say, £2,000, a 13% increase adds £260 to their yearly cost.
Wow, okay.
So a £45 tax cut absorbs only a tiny fraction of that hike.
You are right. When you break it down to a monthly level, £3.75 is basically the cost of one cup of coffee.
Exactly.
It doesn't offset the structural damage to the budget at all.
Furthermore, we have to factor in wage growth, which is actually currently slowing down.
Right.
If your wages are stagnating, but inflation is hovering above the Bank of England's 2% target, moving towards that 2.9 and eventually 3.2% mark we discussed, your purchasing power is shrinking in real terms.
So the box is actually feeling smaller while the blocks inside are getting bigger.
Basically, yes. The underlying cost of the energy itself is still subject to global market swings. So while the bus fare cap and VAT cuts help at the margins, they do not resolve the systemic squeeze on that rigid container.
Which brings us to a really vital question for the credit industry. What actually gets crushed?
Right.
Let us say the utility block expands, the container stays the same size, and the government help only buffers a tiny fraction of that expansion. Mathematically, there is a shortfall. What happens to the other financial obligations?
Well, we see a very predictable cascade effect, really based on the hierarchy of needs.
Okay.
When electricity and gas bills rise, consumers prioritize the utilities because the immediate consequence of not paying is so visceral. Nobody wants to sit in the dark or have a cold house.
Of course not.
As a result, the cash available for unsecured debt just evaporates.
Yeah.
We see less money available for personal loans, credit card bills, and overdraft. Eventually, the pressure moves up the chain to affect mortgage payments, rent, and even council tax.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this represents a massive operational shift for the debt collection sector.
It really does.
If I am running a collection agency, my traditional approach has often been built around identifying and overcoming an unwillingness to pay. Right.
Behavioral issues.
Yeah, my dialer systems, my risk models, my communication strategies, they're largely designed to remind people of their obligations and secure a promise to pay, assuming the money is there if I just apply the right nudge.
Right.
Does this changing economic reality completely break that traditional model?
What's fascinating here is how the primary challenge for collections completely shifts from behavioral correction to financial auditing.
Financial auditing.
Yeah. Historically, you could look at a customer's payment history, see they missed a payment, and assume they were prioritizing discretionary spending over their debt obligation.
Like they bought a new TV instead of paying their loan.
Exactly. But today, the sector must make a crucial distinction. They have to differentiate between a customer's unwillingness to pay versus a genuine inability to maintain their previous payment levels.
Because the historical data is no longer a reliable indicator of current affordability.
Not at all.
So a customer who has flawlessly maintained a repayment plan for 18 months might suddenly default. And it isn't a behavioral issue, it's a mathematical issue. Their container got scrambled.
Exactly. They experienced a genuine, verifiable change in affordability. Their energy, food, and housing costs rose, and their surplus income just vanished.
Wow.
So if a collection agent calls that customer and simply demands the old payment amount, the conversation goes nowhere. A sustainable repayment plan now requires an entirely different level of engagement.
So they have to figure out what the new reality is.
Right. Agencies have to conduct careful, realistic affordability reviews to understand the customer's new reality.
But, I imagine that is incredibly resource-intensive for the collection agencies.
Oh, massively.
They have to transition from being debt enforcers to almost acting like financial auditors for every single account that stalls. Relying on manual income and expenditure forms, where a customer lists out every single grocery bill and subscription over the phone, that takes a massive amount of time.
It is an immense operational burden. And this is why we are seeing a huge push toward open banking solutions in the collection space. Instead of a 45-minute phone call to fill out a form, a customer can grant read-only access to their bank account, allowing the agency's software to instantly analyze their true income and expenditure.
Oh, so it just pulls the data automatically.
Exactly. It verifies the reality of their expanded utility bills and calculates a realistic, sustainable payment plan without all the friction of manual data entry.
That transition to open banking makes a lot of sense, but it still requires the agency to invest heavily in new technology and training.
It does, yes.
And it leads to a much greater demand for support from creditors and from independent debt advisors. The volume of repayment plans needing these complex affordability reviews is only going to grow as that 3.2% inflation projection actually materializes.
Absolutely. Plus, there is the regulatory aspect to consider.
Right, the FCA.
Yes, the Financial Conduct Authority is very clear about the treatment of vulnerable customers. If an agency uses heavy-handed tactics to force a payment that the customer genuinely cannot afford, They aren't just using a bad strategy.
They're risking fines.
They're risking severe regulatory penalties, yes.
Well, let us shift our focus from the consumer to the broader business and creditor environment operating behind the scenes.
Okay.
I want to bring up interest rates. The Bank of England recently held the bank rate at 3.75%. But with inflation creeping up from 2.6 to 2.9 and projected to hit 3.2, future rate hikes remain a looming threat. How do businesses survive this dual pressure? On one side, their customers are falling into arrears because of energy costs, and on the other side, their own operational costs are potentially rising.
This raises an important question about the mechanical reality of commercial finance. Let us look at how a lot of mid-sized creditors or collection agencies manage their cash flow.
Right.
They often use credit facilities, like revolving credit or invoice factoring, to fund their daily operations.
Which are tied to the base rate.
Yes, the rates on those commercial lines are directly pegged to the Bank of England's base rate.
So when the base rate sits at 3.75%, the cost to finance their own payroll, their own technology upgrades, and their own daily operations is high.
Correct. Now, combine that high cost of borrowing with a slowdown in incoming cash because consumers are prioritizing their 13% higher energy bills over their unsecured loan payments.
Oh, wow.
The creditor is caught in a cash flow trap. They are paying higher interest to bridge a widening gap between the money going out to run the business and the delayed money coming in from collections.
And that margin compression spreads through the entire commercial ecosystem, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
If the creditor have cash flow problems, they start paying their own suppliers late. It becomes a commercial debt problem, creating friction throughout the supply chain.
Which is exactly why the timeline for debt recovery is more critical than ever. In a low interest rate environment, a creditor might have the luxury of waiting a few months to see if a customer self-corrects and resumes payments.
Because borrowing money was cheap.
Exactly. The cost of carrying that bad debt on the balance sheet was relatively low.
But at a 3.75% base rate, carrying that bad debt is expensive. You're bleeding money every day.
Yeah.
That invoice remains unpaid.
Yes. The proactive move requires a complete rejection of the wait-and-see approach. Waiting until debts escalate makes recovery harder across the board.
So what do they do instead?
The fundamental advice we see across the industry materials is to prioritize early engagement.
Okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
If I am a creditor, my margins are shrinking and my borrowing costs are high. You are telling me to spend more money on early engagement, more money on adopting open banking technology, and more time on complex affordability checks.
Yes, I am.
How does a business justify that upfront cost when they are already feeling the squeeze?
It really comes down to the cost of failure. The upfront investment in early engagement and accurate affordability technology is just a fraction of the cost of completely writing off a bad debt.
Oh, okay.
If you wait until a customer is drowning in arrears, or if you force an unsustainable payment plan on them, they will inevitably default again.
Because the math still doesn't work.
Exactly. And when they default a second or third time, the likelihood of recovering any funds drops to near zero. By engaging early, literally the moment a payment is missed, or even proactively communicating when a market shock like the Ofgem cap increase occurs, you secure a sustainable trickle of revenue rather than a total loss.
It is about protecting the asset by protecting the customer.
Yes, exactly. Ensuring vulnerable customers receive the right treatment is paramount. Creditors must have clear pathways to refer financially stretched households to professional debt advisors before the situation snowballs.
So it's a team effort, really.
It has to be. A collaborative approach where the creditor, the collection agency, and debt charities work together yields a much higher long-term recovery rate than aggressive, isolated enforcement. Data-driven engagement is really the only viable path to navigating this high-rate, high-inflation environment.
So what does this all mean? We have looked at the raw data, the 13% energy cap hike, inflation heading toward 3.2%, and the Bank of England rate holding steady at 3.75%.
Yeah.
It really paints a picture of a household budget that is mathematically maxed out. For anyone working in credit control or debt recovery, the old playbook of simply sending firmer and firmer letters will fail.
It will.
Stubborn inflation requires a highly nuanced, proactive approach. Genuine affordability, verified by accurate data, has to be the compass guiding every single interaction.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the collection sector is entering a phase where compassionate, realistic engagement is the bare minimum requirement for survival.
Yeah.
It isn't just about good public relations or, fulfilling a regulatory checklist. It is the only practical way to recover funds sustainably. If you do not understand the math inside your customer's budget, your collection strategy is completely disconnected from reality.
It all comes back to recognizing that the constraints have changed. If that utility block stays this large, everything else has to adapt. Which leaves us with a rather compelling question to ponder as we wrap up today.
Okay.
We have largely treated these cost of living squeezes as temporary storms that we just need to weather until things go back to normal. But what if they don't?
That is the scary thought.
Right. If higher essential living costs are becoming the permanent baseline, how will the basic model of consumer credit underwriting need to fundamentally change to survive the next decade?
Yeah, you can't lend the same way.
Exactly. You cannot lend money using the same risk models if the borrower's budget is permanently rearranged. Something to think about the next time you look at your own monthly spreadsheet. Thank you for joining us for this conversation. Take care, and we will talk to you next time on Debt Matters.